Sergeant Ken Mencl joins us this morning from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. It's 26. Hey, we're up a degree. Uh, I'm sure you noticed, right?
You're right.
It's 8:34. Bill Colley as well on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Hey, to start off, you had a great post on Facebook this week. I noticed it. Some of the responses were polite.
Most of them were.
Most of them were.
There were a lot of people that came to bat, I guess, for the sheriff's office because there were a few individuals that didn't appreciate what we had to say with regards to outdoor recreational activities. And look, I enjoy, and I'm sure most of my colleagues at the sheriff's office enjoy getting out and recreating just as much as everybody else does. And it's a privilege and a right that we want to keep going on for many, many years. And, this time of year is expected. We've seen an increase in traffic and outdoor recreation in the South Hills. And there's been some snowfall down there, and hopefully your forecasts bring more snow in, because if we don't get much more snow, those recreational opportunities are going to go away because it is pretty scarce. But there's still a lot of people hitting the trails. And this last Saturday, we were out patrolling, and the two most common violations that we observed were people failing to register their snow machines and also people taking their vehicles off-road onto those groomed snowmobile trails. We wanted to put out in our Facebook post for educational purposes what the statutes are regarding that, so that we can help people avoid getting fines. And so a couple of things I want to look at today. And the first one is State Statute 677112. And that shows that it's a violation to have an ATV or UTV on a groomed snowmobile trail that's 2,000 pounds or over. And the fine for that is $81.50. And to go along with that, you cannot have an ATV or a UTV, a side-by-side, or a RZR as a lot of people call them, on a groomed snowmobile trail that is not equipped with both tracks and or skis. If you do equip your side-by-side or your ATV with tracks, remember that additionally, you're probably going to have your off-road sticker on there, but you have to register that as a snowmobile. The off-road highway sticker is not sufficient because you're using it as a snow machine. And I think a lot of people get hung up on that, thinking that if they have their off-road sticker, it counts, and that's just not simply the case. And then the other thing, like I talked about, is the other issue we saw is if you have a vehicle that's operating on a groomed snowmobile trail, this actually falls under 36 CFR 26112, and that's a code enforced by law enforcement from the U.S. Forest Service. And the language in that code talks about damaging a trail. And the fine for that's $280. And I actually talked with a friend of mine, Jade, who was the U.S. Forest Service, and one of these days I'm going to convince him to come on the show. He's probably listening right now. But Jade really works well with the sheriff's office, and it's a citation that only they can write. But as we go up there and we're looking for issues in the South Hills, because it is within Twin Falls County, even though it's in the jurisdiction of the U.S. Forest Service, we look to find those issues that are going on so that we can keep those trails in good condition and look for those violations. So again, when we come across those violations, we won't necessarily write the ticket, but we'll pass that on to the U.S. Forest Service so those citations or a warning can be issued. And then one of the biggest complaints we've heard from people, though, this year is the process of registering their snow machines. People are having problems with registering their vehicles. In fact, an individual I was talking with the other day told me that he was in line down at the DMV for over an hour. And that line starts at 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
But with your recreational vehicles, be it an ATV, side-by-side, a dirt bike, a boat, a snowmobile, you don't go to the DMV to register those anymore. You take care of those registrations through the Idaho Department of Parks and Rec. You can go online, and if you're fortunate enough, you can register it online. I haven't had any luck being able to do that. I've actually had to call that 1-800 number, and that number is 888-922-6743, and you can register by phone, and that process is open to you 7 days a week. The hours are a little shorter on the weekends, but you can still get through. In fact, we went up Saturday, again, like I mentioned, to do a little patrol, and one of the individuals that was with us on his personal sled, a member of our search and rescue team, his machine was expired. And from We got to the Rock Creek store, and he got on the phone and made a phone call, and within about 8 minutes, he was registered and ready to go. Didn't have any paperwork in hand, but it was easy for us to verify if we would have come across somebody like that who had last year's stickers on. Take that information, call Parks and Rec, and we could verify that he was registered. You can also register your vehicle or your snow machine or motorbike or whatnot at some of the local vendors. Two of those would include Action Motorsports and Adventure. You can go down to either one of these shops with your information. You can register there. So I know a lot of people get upset with the difficulty in registering, but they've really kind of streamlined it, and it's not as bad as it used to be.
We've got more coming up with Ken Mencl, Sergeant Ken Mencl from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. It's 22.
Wow.
Cool off quickly.
Right. It's that time of day.
It's 8:40. Bill Colley, too, on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX at newsradio1310.com. Sergeant Ken Mencl joins us this morning from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley, too, on Magic Valley this morning. Hey, we got a question from a writer who says, my children have 250cc dirt bikes that will allow them to take to the desert and ride. Do these bikes have to be registered?
Yes. Yeah. They have to be registered. And if you do go up in the mountains, if you go from BLM onto U.S. Forest Service property, until they turn 16, they also have to go through a class, and we host that every year. In fact, it's coming up real quickly in May. It's our annual OHV safety class, and the riders who go through there, if they complete the course and they get the certificate, that allows them to operate their little motorcycles out there on those trails independently. Otherwise, if they're out there operating without that permit, the parent can be cited. So you might consider keeping abreast of our Facebook page. We'll post some information coming up shortly about that annual OHV safety fair, and that's usually held at the Magic Mountain Ski Resort parking lot.
And another writer from Hanson says, what information do I need to register my sled and side-by-side?
Just have available your VIN number. If you have the previous year's registration, you'll just be able to call that information into the Idaho Department of Parks and Rec and give them that information from your side-by-side or whatnot, and they'll be able to take care of that. And then you just pay the fee using a credit card over the phone, and they send you the stuff in the mail.
Now, we've got an issue with oversized vehicles being out there, too.
Sure do. Yeah, in fact, there's a couple of issues that we observed as well. As you are heading up Rock Creek Canyon, you pass the U.S. Forest Service boundary. There's a little trail that goes up over a hill and back down. That area to the east of Rock Creek Road is all considered part of that Badger Fire closure. And we had individuals in that closure area off-roading, and they got spoken to. We didn't issue any citations, but people forget that that Badger Fire closure, those restrictions are still in effect and will run through June. But we also see people that are going on the trails, on these 50-inch trails that are designated specifically for ATVs and motorcycles, or your 50-inch razors. They're taking these bigger razors, or vehicles actually, and they're hitting the trail. Or they're going off-road completely and just going rogue and just making their own trail out through the middle of the forest or through the middle of the desert. You can't do that. It ruins it for everybody. And when you look at CFR 26113, it talks about the requirements on a designated trail or designated trail use. And again, if you decide to go rogue and just make your own trail or take a piece of equipment on a trail that's designated for 50-inch only, you're looking at a $230 fine. And I don't mean to, make this whole program about fines and violations. It's about education and helping people understand that it is a privilege to be out there. We don't want to ruin it for everybody and take away our opportunities to use these trail systems. We really enjoy being out there. It's fun to be out there on my own time, and I also enjoy, that's why I got into the profession and do what I do, because I enjoy doing it at work as well and getting out and meeting people. And it's not about writing the tickets, but it's about keeping people safe, and it's about keeping the privilege available so we can continue to do this for years to come. And when it comes to the registration of all of these vehicles that we've talked about, it's about being able to maintain those trails, cutting back the brush and maintaining the area so that, somebody comes through when they shouldn't and they're rutting that trail out and make it almost impassable. It's having a fund source that we can go in there and take care of that and maintain those trails.
We got to mention that there's some changes out there this year that people who may not be familiar with what happened late last summer could be headed back there, and there's some areas that are no go right now.
Yeah, and it's pretty much everything that's east of Rock Creek, Cadgy County, headed towards Oakley. And you can get a copy of that Badger Fire restriction map online there at the U.S. Forest Service. You can do a Google search, and it will give you that information. I know we've posted that information months ago on our Facebook page, but really be familiar with those fire restriction areas. You know, a lot of that underbrush was burned out. A lot of those trees were burned. Right now we're particularly concerned about the possibility of rock slides and/or avalanches because a lot of that underbrush burned away. So just be cognizant of that and be careful with what you're doing, and especially in a vehicle. Stay out of that area for now until we can get the work done that needs to happen to help this area come back and be as vital as it was before the fire.
We have a caller with us, and caller, you're on the air on KLIX with Sergeant Ken Mencl.
Good morning, officer. I was actually the one who wrote in about the 250cc bikes.
Yes.
And I was pretty curious about they don't have VIN numbers to register them. They were like the Walmart purchase bikes. They're very small. My 8 and 7-year-old ride these, or were riding this when we were living in Burley on property. And obviously we do all the safety precautions with a helmet. And I make them wear chest gear and stuff.
That's great.
But riding out in the desert, how do we register one that doesn't have a VIN number or anything like that? I'm just a little confused on it. I was not aware that they had to do that. So I'd like to take those steps to make sure that those guys are legal. And that,
let me double check and make sure that my facts are correct. And you can contact us through me specifically through our Sheriff's Office Facebook page. You can send me an instant message. I'll do a little deeper digging for you and get you some answers so that we can make sure that you're where you need to be with those.
All right. I appreciate that, officer. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for the call. Speaking of when you're sledding, safety, I had some friends many, many years ago. They were running along a canal bed, and they were probably tooling along at a pretty good speed. It was night, and they noticed there was a deer running along in the nearby the canal and going the same direction they were. And they really thought, well, that's interesting to see that happen.
Right.
But the animal decided it wanted to cross the canal.
Mm-hmm.
And it collided with them, ran right into them, knocked them over, flipped the sled. They both rolled down the side of the canal, and they got pretty badly bruised. When you're out there, you know, it's while we may not have to wear a helmet when we're motorcycling, you know, it's still not a bad idea if you want to protect your cranium. Same thing when you're out on a sled. You know, you have to have some, if you want to make sure that you want to come back in one piece, right?
You know, I actually see more people wearing helmets when they're on a snow machine than I do a motorcycle. I'm going to just be perfectly honest here. Saturday was my first day really on a snow machine, and it was a learning experience. And I think I spent more time stuck in the snow than I did actually just zipping around with the other deputies that I was with. I was exhausted. But we must have come across 30 or 40 other people on sleds Saturday, and I didn't see anybody without a helmet. And, you know, one of the times when I went flying off the side of the sled, I went one way, the sled went the other. I did hit a rock, and I banged my knee up pretty good. And if that would have been my head, and it could have been significantly different. And I think a lot of times, you know, there's so much unexpected terrain underneath that snow, whether it's a small tree, a fence post, a rock. I think people recognize the dangers, the more inherent dangers associated with snowmobiling if they're going to go off the groomed trail than perhaps what they might come across on a dirt bike. So I was actually quite happy to see how many people were wearing their helmets. And again, I didn't realize how grueling that was, having spent, you know, hours and hours on a side-by-side or in a motorcycle or on a ATV. I think my legs were sore for about 3 days afterwards because I didn't realize you stand up on a snowmobile more than you sit on the seat, and it was an eye-opening experience.
My first time ever on one, I must have been about 6, and one of my dad's buddies said, "Come on, we're going to go for a ride," and he said, "You got to hold on tight." And I can remember being a new experience. I held on for dear life, and we went down this slope and across an old span bridge, and then did some loops and came back, and we were out for about 20 minutes, and It's exhilarating, but you because you're so close to all of the elements,
Right.
unlike a car, there's nothing between you and that snowbank or anything else out there.
Yeah. And that's just exactly it. I apologize. I got a phone call and it kind of threw my concentration off. Um, you are in the elements, and the unexpected can happen. I mean, you throw a lot of those factors that we just talked about with items. There's not a lot of snow up there right now, so it's very easy to come across some of those obstacles. And I've heard some horror stories about people hitting a tree or a rock or whatnot, and the impact of that was so violent that they broke a leg or something like that. Um, but on top of that, you have to worry about avalanche possibilities, your sled breaking down and being so far out in the middle of nowhere, and the environment changes a lot. When you've got a bunch of snow on the ground and you don't see some of those landmarkers that you're used to in the summertime, it's really easy to become disoriented and lost. And so there's just a lot to keep in mind when comes to snowmobiling. And there's a really great website that you can go to that I've shared on our Facebook page. And the title of the post was called Patrolling the South Hills. There's a PDF form that you can take a look at. And as you look at that PDF form that the Department of Parks and Rec has covered, it talks about how your funds are working, Idaho snowmobile laws, safe travel and ethics, safety and education. It talks about trails and riding areas, and what you can do to protect the privilege we have of using that trail system.
When you reference being out there, there's a number of things. You could run out of fuel.
Yeah.
But this, because in the middle of the night or after, well, it doesn't have to be middle of the night. It could be 6:30 p.m. and right now this time of year it's got to be dark. So
Yep.
someone has to come out and find you and all of that.
Well, and that's just it. And going out to find somebody in these types of conditions, it's not quite as easy as a call to go look for somebody in the summertime, because so much of the terrain is inaccessible based on topography. Finding somebody just isn't quite as easy. We do use ground teams to scour the area, but a lot of times our efforts are more successful by air. So it's a expensive, time-consuming effort to get those calls and go out and look for people. So we really encourage people to be prepared. I was not prepared, unfortunately, but it was a valuable learning experience as I watched everybody that I was with in my party that day. I had a few jerky snacks with me and a bottle of water, but everybody that I was with had a light backpack on that was full of emergency gear, radios, which I had my radio with me, food, things that would allow them to sustain themselves for a day or two should something happen. Because some of these areas where you get into, if you step off your sled and you try and start walking, you sink all the way up to your hip.
Yeah.
You almost have to roll out, otherwise you're just going to kind of be stuck there for a long time because the snow machine stays on top of the snow because it's got such a greater surface area compared to your boots. So those are all things to keep in mind, especially for those that are new to the sport and haven't done it very much.
And plus, you got the burn that took place. You had referenced, when you're out there, if you've done this a lot, you have all these landmarks that you follow. But we had not just here locally, but we've had some fires all over the state
Right.
over the past year. So some area that may have been familiar to you for a decade, all of a sudden, you're out there and a lot of the markers are gone because
Right.
of the burn.
Well, and people forget. I mean, it looks a lot different right now with all the snow on the ground up there, and we haven't discussed the Badger fire for quite some time. That's kind of a memory in everybody's brain, right? And those restrictions, like we spoke about here just a few moments ago, are still in effect through June. So keep those things in mind and remember that it's a very fragile system up there right now, and we're doing our best to preserve and protect it right now. And then once we're able to get crews back up there this spring, they're going to work it, doing what they can to get it back to what we remember.
Yeah, which it can be a quick process.
Yeah,
It takes a few years though. Still,
it does, and we've got some moisture out there, up there in the hills. Not as much as we're typically used to seeing. I mean, typically you drive up to Magic Mountain Ski Lodge, and the snow plow's got snow stacked on the side of the road that goes well up over your car. We're talking 8, 10 feet high snowdrifts on the side of the road all the way up, and right now at best you're looking at 2 or 3 feet in areas. It's just not what we're accustomed to, and I predict, looking at some of the stuff that's out there with the La Nina system that we're in, that we're going to continue to have a rather dry winter compared to where we're at, and we're going to look at some drought issues this summer.
Might save us, though, from some mudslides in that area.
It possibly could, yeah, some mud and rock slides, absolutely.
Because a lot of that vegetation that was holding it together is obviously gone.
Yeah, gone, burnt away.
When people are out there, well, I got to quickly point out, anywhere, you never know when someone's going to be looking at you. I was driving to work yesterday morning, and I just caught a glimpse of a city police car in an area that I've not yet seen one.
Right.
And I've been making that same drive for over 6 years. You had an interesting experience this morning too, where someone apparently didn't see you.
In fact, I didn't think I was going to get here in time because I was a little south of Twin, just kind of getting ready for the program today. But I'm watching the intersection and sending out an email as I'm parked off into the desert, watching the intersection at Foothill Cutoff Road in Blue Lakes. And this white truck just came barreling through the intersection at 55, 60 miles an hour, not giving any regard to the stop sign that was at that intersection. It actually took me a little bit to get caught up. I wasn't even anticipating making a traffic stop. But the inattention between, we see a lot of people not stopping at stop signs. We see a lot of speed. We're still seeing people using their cell phones despite all of the education and traffic stops with warnings we've tried to issue. Still a lot of people out there on their phones texting or Snapchatting or what have you. Just remember to look out for yourself and look out for others, because we still respond to more crashes than we should on a daily basis.
We want to thank Sergeant Ken Mencl for coming by this morning. We might see you again on the 28th.
Yes, we might.
One more time this month.
Right.
Hey, we want to mention, too, we've got Pastors Roundtable coming up. It's 8:59. It's 26 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com with Bill Colley.